Can we talk for a minute? I mean, yes, this is sinister, but it's about sinister. I feel like I need to change the way that I tell stories because there's an overwhelming amount of empathy for killers in my comments. And this is something that I feel like I need to clarify. In this show, we talk about people's past as well as their crimes. And what generally tends to happen is when I'm going through somebody's childhood and it's, something that a lot of people have experienced was essentially not their fault when they were a kid, I have a lot of empathy for that because some of you guys have been through those experiences. So when I'm reading through these cases, I'm not just thinking about that person alone. I'm thinking about some of you guys and the things that you've been through. I mean, the Gina Grant episode taught me a lot about how often you guys relate to some of these experiences. And so when I'm going through these, a lot of times the empathy that I'm extending is for the child that they were, but it's mostly for you guys that resonate with some of these stories. And what I'm finding is happening quite often are people are not taking their empathy cap off, even when I really, really, really paint a turning point in the case. And the empathy cap stays on the entire time. Even though I talk through these throughout it, I feel as though this is like a storytelling or a communication problem on my end. And that tells me that I need to change something in the ways that we communicate. And I want to start off by straight up having this conversation with you guys. So listen, it is okay to feel some empathy for the person they were, or if you see yourself or a friend or family in some of these stories. But hold on, I need help for a minute. Where are the people in the comments that genuinely think some of these people are just pieces of shit? Guys, I need your energy back. I need you to refuel me so that we're all on the same page. Feel bad about the child they were. Find empathy with people going through similar situations. If you're going through a similar situation, don't kill people. That is the code of conduct. If your empathy cap is so strong, I want you to keep that. I want you to hold on to it because it is so beautiful as long as the world doesn't take advantage of you, right? But right now, in this moment, you sweet child, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to put you right here, and I'm going to remind you, we feel bad for the child they were. We do not excuse murder. We are only here to understand the complexities of life, and some people should really stay in jail. I put you back up here. And we're going to move into today's case. Normally on Sinister, we dive into extreme personalities, childhood traumas, the thing that made this person. And this week, that's exactly what I did. I dove into Sydney Powell's past, her present, her history, her relationships. I mean, I even wrapped it up by watching the actual Bodycam video when she was arrested on the day she killed her mom. And I gotta tell you, Sydney Powell was not a stressed out college student. She was not a fan of The Bachelor like the other girls, and she was not an honor roll student anymore. She was a liar, a lurker, a manipulator, and also a killer. Welcome back to another week, another Sinister. It's me, your favorite Hot Topic employee, BOZE. Well, I don't know if I'm your favorite, and also I didn't work at Hot Topic. How are you supposed to trust me? I've already lied in the beginning of the video. I'm just kidding. Welcome back to the channel. If you have been enjoying Sinister, we're actually going to switch up and try to do Sinisters twice a month now instead of 4, just to focus on video quality. And also, I want to put out other creative stuff on the channel. That means the Sinisters that you do get will be much, much, much more refined. And this week, this is a case where I've actually watched the trial footage before, and I've seen the prosecution opening statements. At the time, I didn't know that much about the case. I let the court unfold it for you and for me. But this week, I'm getting in with every detail that I possibly can about Sydney Powell. And I gotta tell you, I've never seen anything like this before. This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. You can head to squarespace.com/sinister or put sinister in the checkout code to get 10% off of your first website or domain purchase. You have to know what Squarespace is, but if you don't, it is a website building platform that has every single thing that you could possibly need. SEO help, email marketing, creating a shop, selling courses, whatever you want to do, it's all in Squarespace. And look, for me personally, creating a design on the website is kind of the most anxiety-inducing part for me. Like, I'm not very aesthetic, so I don't really know where things go. If you're like me in that aspect, Squarespace has hundreds of designs that you can just scroll through and choose from, and everything is completely customizable. You can just click on something, change the color, add an image, add text, whatever. And in fact, within about 10 minutes, you know how to use everything on the website. It's pretty fun to play around. And this is coming from somebody who's really bad at figuring out aesthetic stuff. Look, if you have a business or a portfolio to share, whatever it may be, you need a website. Go to squarespace.com/sinister or put sinister in the checkout to get 10% off of your website or domain. Sydney Powell was born March 21st, 2000 in a town called Akron, Ohio. From the outside looking in, Sydney's life looked nearly perfect. And here's the kicker. From the inside looking out, Sydney's life still looks pretty perfect. But let me not crash out right now. Let me get to it, okay? So she grew up in a 2-parent household with her parents, Brenda and Steven. And that's kind of the first thing for me. All too often, I go through cases where, the dad's not in the picture, or maybe the mom is in and out of the picture. We're raised by grandparents. We're in the system, something like that. Nope. Sydney has the first 2 pieces already in order. I mean, guys, raise your hand if you only had one parent or no parent present. She already won half the battle, okay? So not only are Brenda and Steven, her parents, happily married, they have one other child. Sydney's got a little brother, and everybody's just working and doing their thing. Now, you guys know, funny little detail about me. If we can, I love to see the childhood home. I don't know, it just kind of helps paint a little picture of what their life was like. I've seen cases where somebody grows up in a 6-bedroom mansion, and then I've seen cases where, there's 5 people in a 2-bedroom house. And I think this gives a lot of information. So for Sydney, she grew up in a 3-bedroom home with 1 bathroom. It was about 1,013 square feet. Single family home built in 1957. So, this kind of tells me everybody's got their own space in the house. They all have a bedroom. Everybody's got to share a bathroom, which can kind of be a pain for a teenage girl. But listen, in this house, we have everything we need, okay? We have love. We have siblings and parents to lean on. There's always food on the table. Her parents were constantly encouraging her to do more and trying to save up a little college fund for both the kids. I mean, look, we got all the pieces. Now, as far as Sydney's demeanor, when she was younger, her grandma actually described her as sweet, soft-spoken, and thoughtful. She would remember things about the family members, conversations they had, birthdays. Like, Sydney was on top of it. It seemed like she cared, but also she had very gentle energy. Now, when she was 14, she attended a school called St. Mary in Ohio. It was actually a Catholic school, but, sometimes the super religious or the all-girls schools, boarding schools, whatever, they really can mess people up. Sydney thrived here. I think that also says something about her character. She was really good at fitting in. She didn't want too much, didn't want too little. She was easy to be around. Even in a private school where the hierarchies are a little weird and everything is so cliquey, Sydney, it just worked for her. In fact, she stood out because her grades were good. She was pretty well known. She was soft-spoken and she didn't want too much. She just was happy to be there. People liked Sydney. She fit into their world pretty easily. She went on school retreats. She was invited to ski trips. She was the captain of a soccer team. She even took on a bit of tutoring and she was mentoring younger students. Sometimes people do all of these things because they want to be on top. They're like, look at me, look at me. Sydney was a community member that everybody was happy to have. I mean, she just fit in like a puzzle piece. She got every invite. She was on top of all of her work and people liked her. Sydney was known to have quite a bit of anxiety. And, she's gentle and soft-spoken, so she doesn't always reveal these anxieties. But I will say they were very not strange, but particular. One instance of this says, quote, her grandma once noticed that she became a little antsy once a barn bucket was overfilled with water. It was something that most kids wouldn't think twice about, but Sydney honed in on. So what I take from this is, she and her grandma are in the barn one day and there was a bucket that just had water filled all the way to the brim. And Sydney not only didn't like that and felt anxiety around that, but her grandma noticed that this gentle, soft-spoken child was completely fixated on the bucket of water and the fact that it looked like it was going to overflow soon, and she couldn't get her mind off of it. This is something that happened to her when she was much younger, and I can only imagine what other type of very particular anxieties that Sydney had. Maybe some of you guys resonate a little bit with this thought process and what other anxieties can be tied to it, but I think this is a really pivotal moment that just gives us a little more color into how Sydney's mind works. Because I saw that body cam and I don't know what is going on. You know what, guys, sometimes in Sinister, I think some people are just literally just off their rocker. So during this period of time, Sydney had no history of mental health visits, breakdowns, guidance counselor visits, nothing. She was a happy child. And I don't just mean, something was bubbling under the surface or anything. Really for Sydney, the only thing bubbling under the surface was her extreme anxiety that she hadn't really found any coping mechanisms for. And guys, hey, how many of you guys are the anxiety monster? You are the embodiment of anxiety. If that's you, I need to take a minute to pat you on the back because apparently some people just cannot handle their anxiety that it gets to this point. Look, I know some of y'all watching are 10 times more anxious than Sydney Powell ever was and will ever be. And you are wearing it proudly and you are wearing it well. So just a moment for y'all because this chick just has anxiety. She literally just has anxiety. Okay. Sydney cruises through school, going all the way up until 2018. And look, she made all of her parents' dreams come true because she was well liked in school, she got good grades, and this got her a partial scholarship. Her parents didn't have a whole lot of money, and they were saving up for both of their kids to have a little bit of a college fund. And so Sydney earning and achieving this partial scholarship, this is like the dream. And to top it off, Sydney and her mom are best friends. And look, I don't mean best friends like the type of mom that tries to turn their daughter into the friend they never had or the overly attached mom. No. Sydney's mom, Brenda, was the type to go to work, treat her daughter like a daughter, not a bestie. But at the end of the night, oh my God, let's watch The Bachelor. Okay, Sydney, it's time for bed now. Brenda was a true mom. Kind, warm, not your bestie, but I love you, we're close, and now it's time for you to go to bed, kid. That's the type of mom she was. As far as Brenda as a person, her mother, who was Sydney's grandma that commented on her demeanor earlier, her mother reflected on Brenda and said, Brenda was a very sweet and respectful child. And not only that, through all of Brenda's years, because of course her mother, Sydney's grandma, has been around the entire time, her mother said that Brenda never raised her voice. She never raised her voice. She was always able to communicate empathetically, kindly, and very patiently. Brenda was not just a dedicated mom, she was also a dedicated wife and a dedicated member of the community. And not just any community. Brenda had been taking care of sick kids since she was in college. After college, she became a child life specialist. She worked at the Akron Children's Hospital and Showers Family Center for childhood cancers and blood disorders. This to me says so much about Brenda. Because one, she started volunteering with the children long before she graduated. She did volunteer work with the sick children and then decided, I'm dedicating my life to this. I'm doing this. Nobody can talk me out of it. And then two, the other part that really hits me about that is that job is not just taking care of sick children. It is sometimes giving bad news to parents. It is sometimes being there in their final moments. And it is incredibly, incredibly hard for the workers and the nurses that get close with patients over a period of time and know that their condition is terminal. And Brenda took that on all because she wanted to take care of the children. This was not a bragging piece for her on the resume. It wasn't, oh, I'm a good person because I take care of kids. It was in her heart. Much of Brenda's life was dedicated to counseling pediatric cancer patients and their families. She gave everything to the kids that she treated. So much so that it was quite common that Brenda would miss Christmas with her family to stay there with the kids because nobody else was at the hospital. And if that doesn't tell you what type of mother Brenda was to Sydney, I don't know what will. This episode is sponsored by ZocDoc. Look, how many excuses are you gonna make before you go to the doctor? If you are also a person who is not very type A and it's hard to organize stuff or find time for it, look, this is what you got to do. You got to download the ZocDoc app or just go to the website, okay? You can go to the browser or download this app, whatever is best for you. And the next time you feel that weird little pain in your foot or you feel something in your throat or that thing that comes up every month, whatever it may be, just open up the app, put in your insurance, put in your location, and just pick a doctor to go to. Schedule it. Put it in your calendar. Don't even think about it, okay? I'm not getting any younger, folks, and we gotta get to the doctor sometimes. My favorite thing about ZocDoc is just the ease of booking appointments. I've always hated calling. I've always hated looking at my calendar and trying to find a time, and then the appointments are 2 months out. Ugh, I'm over it. I think my doctors are even annoyed because even though I found my doctors on ZocDoc, I still book them through ZocDoc. And they're like, can you could just call us? And I'm like, no, this is the future. So if you need to go to the doctor and you haven't yet, it's time to get ZocDoc. And here's the best part. It's totally free. However, I like you guys to let them know where you came from. All you got to do is go to ZocDoc.com/sinister. You can download the app directly from that link, or you can just browse the website and see how it works. Super easy. Just go to ZocDoc.com/sinister and please let them know where you came from. So while Brenda is on her mission, she still is a woman that needs love. And that is when she met Steven, her now husband. Steven worked in metals. He was the vice president of quality at like a treatment company. Man had a good job. And all Brenda wanted to do was have some kids, take care of the kids. They come together and they said, you know what? Let's build a life. And that's exactly where Sydney and her little brother come in. And just to lend a little more credence to Brenda's character, even after she had her family with Steven, Sydney's born, the house is here, she's still working with kids at the cancer treatment center. Brenda actually stayed in touch with many of the families, whether the children were survivors or whether they were no longer with us. It seems like her work was deeply personal for her, and it was very important to keep some of those connections alive and be there for those families even years later. Now, back to where we are currently. Now, like I said before, Brenda and Sydney were super, super close. Like kind of unusually close. Like not in a weird way. It's just like they got along a little bit too well. The family said that they never fought and never got into arguments. And everything was just chill. Look, here's the thing. For me, that's pretty uncommon for a mother and daughter because, you know, the teenage years are tumultuous. They start to change. They want to try new things. But Sydney and her mom were so similar. There was just no tension, no nothing, no animosity. And even if they probably were mad about something, they seemed to take space and everything would just come back like it was normal. There were never any fights, disagreements, no nothing in the house. And Sydney seemed to really respect her mother. Sydney turns 18 and it's time for her to go to college. And oh my God, her parents are so excited. I can only imagine, maybe some of the parents can chime in here, but like, I'm sure there's a feeling of like being sad your kid is going off to college, but then also a little excitement of, oh my God, we made it to 18. I did it. I kept them alive on this earth. We have made it to 18. Sweet Lord. So a little sadness, a little, missing your kid, but Sydney's going to be back for the summers. And also she has made it. So she enrolls in a small liberal arts college. It was called Mount Union University in Alliance, Ohio. It was just about 70 miles from Cleveland, or roughly around where they were from. So it kind of was enough for Sydney to feel like she's starting a new life, but also she could still stay connected to her family because, if she needed to, she could go home. Now, remember, I said that Sydney wasn't necessarily popular in school, but well-liked. Like, she was in all of the social circles. Well, her social life just absolutely skyrockets when she gets to college. She now has 3 roommates. One of her roommates is her best friend. She's always around the girls. And also, there's this, you feel like you're coming into your womanhood, which is so hilarious because, at 18, no, you're not. All the old heads we know, 18, you are a child. You're a baby. But when you're 18, okay, honestly, real talk, you just think you're the shit. This is amazing. You got away from home. You're living with your best friends. I'm doing the school thing. But, on the weekends, you're, partying, chilling, doing whatever. It's a fun time, right? So remember, Sydney's best friend is one of her dorm mates. Her name is Lauren Curry. And Lauren is somebody that has known Sydney for years. And she also observed every single thing that happened leading up to where we are now. I love to just kind of lean on some of the insights that Lauren had because she's such a good barometer of knowing Sydney for a long period of time. So if there's any insight from Lauren, I'll let you guys particularly know when that comes in. But when Sydney was in high school, she was very successful because she was a high achiever. Usually people that are high achievers, they have high standards that they're trying to meet. Maybe they're set by others. Maybe they're set by themselves. But, high achievement in college is get an A. It's not climb Mount Everest tomorrow, bitch. It's go study, pass the test, right? But I don't think Sydney expected how difficult college is. Nobody does. I don't get what it is, but there's some kind of jump between your junior, senior year into the sophomore year of college where it's just brutal. Freshman year, you're kind of swimming. You're oh, whoa, this is different. You're trying to balance this new life that you're living in between all the work. And then sophomore year, it's almost for some people, all hell breaks loose, okay? Kudos to you guys that tank through a whole 4 years or a whole 8 years. But dude, that sophomore year will really do you in. And Sydney actually kind of started struggling a bit her first year. It was showing. She held herself to these really, really high standards, but college was a little bit more difficult. And every step of the way that she didn't hit the mark that she wanted to, Sydney really got anxious. She had always been a quiet worrier, but now the stress of college, the social dynamics, the academics were just really weighing on her. And it seemed like Sydney was starting to short circuit. In order to cope with the mounting pressure, Sydney starts drinking. Sydney's not somebody with a history of extreme emotional abuse or anything where when she drinks, the alcohol brings out this monster, this thing, this something. Sydney would just get really, really fucked up and then just kind of pass out. So even though her drinking was escalating and in fact even secretive at times, she really wasn't much of a nuisance. She was just kind of passing out or not keeping up with her schoolwork. Now, the one thing that really stood out to her friends was Sydney started changing her major constantly. She seemed like she did not know what she wanted. She seemed extremely overwhelmed and thought, well, maybe if I go over here, it'll get a little bit easier. Or maybe if I go over here, my life will be a little bit more clear. But to the other college students, this was just a friend who had started drinking a whole lot, was still doing their work, and just kept sporadically changing all of their majors. There were no periods where Sydney was particularly down or, particularly on a high. It was just every week, something was happening week over week, and it was just unpredictable behavior that was driven by anxiety. Lauren said, quote, she started off in exercise science freshman year, her first semester, but she didn't like the classes, so she switched over to psychology and sociology. But then she didn't really like that. So this year, she switched to education, and she didn't really like that either. That's one of the reasons she left. She couldn't find what she liked.
and I think she struggled in her classes.
This part I think is interesting, and I called to my college people that maybe switched a lot of majors or were trying to figure something out. She went from exercise science to psychology and sociology and then education. These are all really, really massive shifts. So I'm wondering if her interests were changing, if she was looking for courses that she thought would be easier to pass, or if maybe it was just a career decision and she felt like, oh, this is going to be more solid. But I'm curious if you guys see anything in those patterns, what you can deduce from it. But I just thought that was very interesting. And I think Lauren's insight is really valuable for this case. So this is where things start to get a little weird. During her second year, and by the way, all of that was like in the first year, a little bit into the second year. But, you know, after summer, she's back, second year hits, and Sydney just starts skipping classes. It's not like she's like, you know, deep in addiction or something and like getting drunk like in the daytime and just like whatever. Like, no, she was just overwhelmed, skipping classes. And they said she spent more and more time in her dorm room, sometimes sleeping for up to 16 hours a day. Sydney was clearly struggling with a case of depression. Some friends noticed that when she was with her group of friends, oh, she would be so happy. Sydney was like totally elated. But when she was alone, it seemed like these periods really brought her down. You know, it's also possible that because she was so close with her mom and her little brother was always around and the family was tight-knit and she had all these friends in high school, maybe Sydney was very dependent on social circles and didn't realize it. The particular keyword that they give is that Sydney was lonely and she would get really upset when she was by herself and no one was around, but she would also go into strange periods where she would withdraw. And then the blackouts started. Now, here's the thing. The blackouts would go on for a long time, like sometimes 90 minutes. And at first, Sydney's friends took these pretty seriously. They didn't understand what was going on. Like I mentioned, Lauren had known her for years. These blackouts seemingly came out of nowhere, but they would be in correlation to things that Sydney didn't really want to talk about or she wanted to avoid. But the friends took them at face value. Maybe this was medical, maybe this was something. And they treated her as though she was having some kind of mental, physical blackout and she couldn't remember things. But in retrospect, those friends knew that the things that Sydney couldn't remember were generally things that she didn't want to remember. The crazy thing is these memory lapses were not alcohol or drugs. They were just periods of time where she would be gone and then she would come back and people would have to accept that. Empathy cap moment. I know there are going to be some people that try to deduce what this is or they try to figure it out. Spoiler alert, some people think that Sydney was faking the blackout so she didn't have to take accountability for certain things. So I understand some of you may try to find a mental or psychological, medical, whatever diagnosis for this, but I need you to know that it is possible that people will lie to you to avoid accountability. A lot of the things that Sydney was blacking out about were like deadlines or like places she was supposed to be or like things that she had said she was going to do or something. And then suddenly Sydney would just black out. By the end of her first year at Mount Union University, Sydney's grades had completely fallen and she was placed on academic probation. For somebody that's always been pat on the back for being an honor roll student or belonging, this should have been a reality check, but for Sydney, who can't handle any anxiety at all whatsoever, like you were placed on academic leave for not doing your work. I mean, like bro, this is first year. And the other thing is with first year, you have an opportunity to correct. You have an opportunity to do a little bit better. Like, you know, we're back from the summer. Let's kick it into high gear. Nope. Sydney just wanted to watch The Bachelor with her friends, hang out, watch TV, drink with her friends. And when nobody was around, she would just curl up in a ball. And then, you know, people come out again. Sydney comes out again, but no schoolwork, nothing in between. The academic probation was not a wake-up call for first-year college student Sydney. And by fall of her second year, the liberal arts college placed her on suspension. Maybe I'm confused. I'm curious of some of y'all's experiences because I'm like, it ain't Harvard. We're not at Princeton. We are first year at a liberal arts college majoring in psychology or education or I don't even know what major she's in at this point. But like, am I missing something here? When Sydney received the suspension, she did not tell anybody. No friends, no family. And on top of that, she starts to exhibit some very strange behaviors, but not strange in a like, oh my God, we're moving into psychotic break territory. More like avoidant or I'm not really sure. But first, I need to remind you, Sydney Powell is a liar. She's not just this poor, anxious mess that needs to be coddled or needs some attention or something. She's a Chandler Halderson level liar. Sydney Powell will lie to your face to push off any anxiety that you are causing her, no matter the degree. One example of this is when she was suspended from school, she would sometimes lurk around her dorm or sometimes drive, 70 miles to get back home. And one day on the Life 360 app, her mom noticed that she was home for the evening and she texted her very nicely like, oh, do you not have any afternoon classes today? Like, I see that you're home. And Sydney comes up with this lie. This is a Chandler Halderson level lie. She told her mom that there were no afternoon classes at all this week because her teacher and her spouse took this week as their vacation time, so they just gave me a little worksheet and some work online to do while she's gone. Sydney's mother confronts her about not being in school. She does not come clean with her suspension. Some people would. A lot of you guys would. You'd be like, oh my God, this is too much pressure. Let me just say this. She did not come clean with her suspension. She did not avoid it and just not respond. She didn't come up with a little lie. She came up with an intricate lie. She came up with a lie that she needs you to believe in detail so that you'll fuck off. That is who Sydney Powell is. Then in another text exchange, her mother is very concerned and sees Sydney is how you should be in school or at your dorm studying. And so eventually her mom kind of pushes on it and says, why do I always feel like you are scamming me? Just remember that you need the grades to keep your scholarships. And Sydney responded, yes, I know. My grades are good. Thank you very much. The thank you very much is so interesting and so snarky because Sydney was not in school. Her mother was correct. Sydney was not telling her the truth. And by her mother's statement, why do I feel like you're always scamming me? It sounds like her daughter was lying to her a lot, but because they had this really good relationship where they never really argued, Brenda doesn't push the issue. She chooses to want to believe her daughter. She wants to believe that her daughter is in school, having a good time, using her scholarship that she earned and putting together her future. But Sydney just kept lying. I do also want to say there's another massive path here that Sydney could have taken. This is me shaking all of you guys that like sometimes try to find too much empathy for people that do crazy shit. I'm like, do I need to tell stories differently or something? Because what the Sydney, quite possibly, because it doesn't seem like these are parents that were like, your whole future depends on this college. You need to get into Princeton. Like they were just like, hey, are you using your scholarship? Are you in school? We're so proud of you. Like it wasn't that kind of family, but they wanted her to go to college. I feel like there's a world, and a lot of people have had this conversation before, where they go to their parents and they say, hey, I'm 19. This is really stressing me out. I'm not doing well here. I'd be really upset if I lost my scholarship, but this is incredibly stressful. I need to take a gap year, or I just want to go work a normal job for a year. That is so socially acceptable, especially like at this time. And I mean, this is a modern case. This just happened just a couple years after COVID, okay? We're not in the 90s or anything. Question, how many of you guys would allow your kid to take a gap year right after they went through hell going through middle school and high school? I don't understand. And then I'm thinking about this a little bit with the Chandler Halderson case for you guys that are familiar with it. Do you remember Chandler Halderson's parents? I've gone through quite a bit of that case. I've watched the court things, a lot of it with you guys, right? If you remember Bart and Krista, my God, those were 100% people that would be like, oh yeah, honey, take a leap year. This is like not a situation where the child just cannot talk to their parents, because, hey, some of y'all have those parents, the ones that are like, like, no, this is what you're doing. This is your future. In fact, I'm going to pick your major for you, bitch. Like, some of y'all have those parents. Sydney's parents were not this rigid, education based, your education is tied to your parents' ego, blah, 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 blah. Your career is tied to your parents' ego. No, that wasn't them. Okay. Now, we've established Sydney Powell will lie to your face to get you to back away from her, no matter what it's about. Shit, she'll even tell you she blacked out, doesn't remember, doesn't know what's going on. Well, her bizarre intentional behavior continues in January of 2020. After Sydney was suspended from school, she has no classes, she has no campus housing, she has no access to the school, no key card, no nothing. She returned to campus, she moved into her residence hall, unpacked her bags, and then lived in the dorm as though nothing had happened. Remember, Sydney did not tell her friends or her family that she was suspended from school. She just moved back in and acted like nothing happened. She wasn't acting strange. She wasn't acting out of it or anything. She, in fact, seemed like she was just trying to fit in, act like nothing was happening. Now, a couple things happened along the way. You know, at one point, her dad, Steven, tried to log into the university's financial portal to pay a bill, and he was locked out. When I say Sydney was suspended, it was goodbye. You don't go here anymore. And she just kept this lie up, because remember, this was in fall and we're already in January. Then the president of the sorority notices that Sydney's name is not on the roster. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some other rumblings going on before this, but when the president gets the roster list, I mean, this just confirms it for her. And they contact the associate dean of students. So then the dean calls up Sydney and like, dude, hold on. Y'all gotta understand, this has to be such a weird fucking call for the dean and the sorority girls, because how do you act when your friend that you've known for a while and like seemed pretty cool gets kicked out of school, doesn't tell anybody, and she's just back and you guys were watching The Bachelor last weekend? So the dean probably doesn't really know how to approach this, but they call Sydney and they're like, hey, what the fuck are you doing here? Well, Sydney just plays dumb, because remember, Sydney is a liar. Like, this is all so intentional. And she's like, what's going on? And the dean's like, you were suspended. And she denies knowing anything about her suspension. And the dean is like, okay, no, we're not doing this. We're absolutely not doing this. And they keep pushing and pushing and pushing until finally Sydney admits it. She not only admits that she knew she was suspended and she knew that there was that conversation, but she admits that she knew she wasn't supposed to be there. She tries to plead with the dean somehow, probably to save herself of embarrassment, and the dean is very strict on this and gives her a timeline. She must be out of the residence hall and off campus. This is also kind of a concerning situation for the girls. Actually, it's a very concerning situation. Imagine you're in a sorority with all your friends. You guys come back from Christmas break and there's like this drunk girl that's not supposed to be here. It's kind of scary. Why is she here? What is she gonna do? Is she gonna like hurt everybody in the sorority? It's a safety issue. When somebody has been barred from a property and they come back weirdly, it is a safety issue. So the deadline came and it's time for Sydney to move out. And she just stayed there. She didn't pack a single bag. She didn't move. She didn't do anything. Sydney was still there. If I was one of the girls in the sorority right now, I would be freaking the fuck out, dude, because like, what is going on? So they call again, and this time they bring in the vice president of student affairs. And during this meeting, Sydney was extremely calm, kind of tries to play dumb in the beginning. And then once again, they push and she admits it. She admits that she knew she was supposed to move out. She starts off by saying, what? What was the date? I blacked out. I don't know. And they're like, Sydney, like, come on. Once again, I want to remind you guys, this is like a safety issue. This is like really weird, intentional behavior. And so they finally get her to admit that she knew what date she was supposed to move out. They probably had email logs, messages, something like this. This was not all just through a phone call. This was very formal from the university. So they present her with whatever they have, and then finally she like full on admits it. They asked her about her parents, and she tells them, oh, they already know. You don't have to call them or anything. Just they already know. I just need a little more time. So the dean of admissions, they take pity on Sydney. She's a sorority girl. She struggled in college. She's 19. They feel bad for her. And they're like, okay, just you got to go. So let's wrap this up. They give her another date. And then Sydney stays past that date as well. This time, there are no emails. There are no more nice phone calls and meetings. Sydney gets confronted directly in her dorm. And they know what's going to make Sydney move, telling her that they're going to call her parents. This time, when that threat comes out, Sydney leaves immediately. Packs up everything, hightails it out of there. Now, this should also tell you how desperate Sydney was to keep up this lie. She didn't really have anywhere to go. She kind of just starts drifting around aimlessly, like maybe sleeping in her car some nights. We do know that she checked into several local hotels. And then sometimes when her parents weren't there, she would go back home, just acting like things were perfectly normal. The other part that I was thinking about when I was going through this case is she went to several hotels to like stay the night. I know her parents were checking the Life 360 app pretty regularly. So if they saw her staying in random hotels or something, I'm sure Sydney made up some crazy lie for that. Like she had to have. Her parents were very caring, always checking in on where their daughter was. And like if you see your kid at a hotel 3 or 4 times, like I'm not asking questions. I'm driving down there. I sure am. Now this goes on for a while until March 2nd, 2020, when Sydney goes back to campus. She just goes back. Her friends were there. She finds them. She comes in and they're watching The Bachelor. And she's like, yeah, let's watch The Bachelor. So, I'm sure it was a little tense, but Sydney showed up and her favorite show was on. So they all sat down and watched it together. The next day was March 3rd. And as usual, Sydney's parents are checking the Life 360 app, and Steven notices that she's at home. Now, in the past, she was kind of able to convince Brenda that, I've got the afternoon off or something like that. But this time, it's morning, and Steven knows that Sydney should be in school. She was suspended in the fall. She randomly returned to campus in January. It is now March. Her parents still do not know that she has been suspended from the school. I'm wondering if one of the girls from the sorority called the dean to report it. I'm actually sure one of them did, because that same morning that Steven noticed Sydney was at home on the app, he gets a call from somebody that works at Mount Union University. They tell him that Sydney has been suspended and she is no longer enrolled at the university. When Steven asked how long she had been unenrolled at the university, the person kind of paused and gave a very ominous answer. And they said, you would have to ask her. So Steven decides to go home, but he knows that Sydney can also track him with the Life 360 app, so he leaves his phone at work. He gets to the house and Sydney is there, and she is shocked to see her dad. I'm sure she saw his little dot on that phone and thought, okay, I'm good. Nope. Steven shows up. Sydney's in the basement, and he said she was very startled, and he confronts her about not being enrolled. Her dad asked her why she's struggling, like what is going on, and she said, bro, hold on. Hold on. Can I just say, this is Sydney's opportunity to lay it all out. What's going on? What's in your head? This is her response for all of that shit we just heard the past couple of months. She said that she's frustrated because it seems like everyone around her seems to have it all figured out and she doesn't. First of all, sister girl, ain't none of them freshmen in the sorority. Nobody knows what they're doing. Like, nobody knows, Sydney goes on and on. She's used to being on top of things. She's a very high achiever, and she just tells her dad how, everybody's got it and I just don't know what I'm doing. And, this really stresses her out. And guess what? Her dad listened. He understood. He empathized with her. All of this running and hiding from the school, from her friends, from herself. And here's her dad saying, okay, I get it. This is tough. Let's take a beat. Let's figure this out. I'm sorry. Her dad said, I'm sorry. And he listened to her. You would think that this was going to be the end of the world for Sydney. This is what she was so worried about for months. I mean, when they told her that they were going to call her parents, she booked it out of there. Her greatest fear was her parents finding out. Here's her father being open with her, listening to her, understanding. He thinks these are typical concerns for people her age. It's crazy. This is so not even a big deal that he's like, okay, listen, I got to get back to work. I'm going to text your mom, talk to her. She'll be there for you, but I got to get back to work and we'll figure it out. Steve leaves. He calls Brenda, his wife. I mean, I'm sure he was very upset on the call or something talking to his wife, but when talking directly to Sydney, he was so okay, talk to your mom. We're going to figure this out. And so for Sydney, the worst part is over. Brenda is now aware. Her dad is aware. They want to work with her on this. They want to figure something out. She might get a little heat from her parents, but the worst is over. Brenda gets home at 12:36 p.m. She texted her husband and said that she was pulling into the driveway, and she goes in to talk to Sydney. And she said, hey, together, we're going to call the university and we'll talk to them. She calls Dean John Fraser at the school, and he doesn't answer, but she leaves a voicemail and says, I'm Sydney Powell's mom. I want to talk. I found out everything going on. Call me back if you can. And it's the dean. They care about the students. And also, at this point, Sydney Powell is really kind of an interesting case. So he returns her call in just a matter of minutes. He brings in his associate dean, a woman named Michelle Gaffney, and they called Brenda together to discuss what's been happening over the past couple of months. And Brenda answers the phone, but they don't get to talk to her because they hear this really loud thud almost. And the dean actually said later in a testimony, it was like an expulsion of air, like the air was knocked out of somebody. And then there were a number of thumping sounds that went on for maybe 15 seconds or so. And they said it was silent for a bit. They hear screaming, but the screams are moving. They're moving away, stopping, and then coming back closer to the phone. And they have no idea what is going on. But after the screams, they said that they heard a hard object seemingly hitting something solid, harder than ever, and then the call went dead. Of course, this call sounds really crazy to us because this is a true crime podcast, but the deans legitimately did not know what this was or what was happening. So, of course, they call back. And luckily, Brenda answers the phone. It said, hello. And the person said, yes, this is Brenda. It's a very calm voice. And they said, is this, Brenda Powell? And they said, yes, this is Brenda. And then the dean said that they looked at each other because they knew this is not Brenda. They are not really buying that this is Brenda. And then Dean Fraser said, Sydney, I think this is you. This is not Brenda. And then the person on the other end hangs up. This time, the deans are not playing around. They have met this woman in person multiple times, outside of the timeline and all the crazy stuff. They're picking up on the energy. And Michelle is not playing around. The associate dean, she calls the police immediately. She reports that there is a disturbance at the Powell residence. Well, then Steven, the dad, he ends up getting a call from his friend who is a detective. So this guy has known Steven for a long time, and he gives him the heads up hey, I just got a report that there's a disturbance at your house. Police are on the way. So Steven is like, what is going on? He calls Brenda. She doesn't answer. Packs up for the day, and he heads over to the house. He gets in contact with Sydney, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And Sydney's like, oh, nothing. Mom's just on the phone with the school right now. That is, okay, obviously she killed her mom, okay, on this phone call. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a second, but I just need you to register that. Sydney Powell has killed her mother, and now her dad calls and is like, hey, what's going on? And while her mother is bleeding out, she tells her dad, in a calm voice, oh, she's on the phone. She's just like on the phone right now with the school. And then he tells Sydney, okay, well, I just got a call from Detective so-and-so, and he said something's going on. So the police are on the way. And that's when Sydney gets absolutely hysterical on the phone. She goes from calmly telling her dad, oh, mom's on the phone with the university right now, to screaming and telling. And when I say screaming, there's a body cam of this, okay? She's screaming and saying, Dad, oh my God, somebody broke into the house. Somebody broke into the house. Somebody broke into the house. I mean, she's just going absolute, like, it is very strange. We're going to insert some of the body cam here because I think it is important for you guys to understand Sydney's demeanor.
She's on the ground. So there's...
Who is it?
My mom! Someone broke in the back window.
All right, hold on.
She's on the ground.
Hold on. Where's your mom? Okay, stay right here.
No, there's so much blood. No, please.
Man.
She's around the corner now.
So it's around this time that Sydney starts to consciously stage a break-in in the house. She throws something through the window, trying to imply that somebody broke into the house, came in through the window by smashing it at 1 o'clock on a weekday. But of course, if you watch a lot of true crime, you know that if somebody throws an object from inside of the house, that break on the window looks different than somebody entering the house from the outside and throwing an object from the outside. So Sydney tries to stage a crime scene. She tries to stage the window being broken, all while screaming while the police are on the way. Now, remember, the detective told the dad a few minutes ago, he's been trying to get in contact with Brenda. He eventually talks to Sydney and they have a whole conversation. I mean, when you think about it, if there's a disturbance in the home coming from the university, the police are going to be there in 10 or 20 minutes? This is the fastest 15 minutes of Sydney's fucking life, okay? She is running through the house trying to make it look like somebody else did it. And you can see this insane energy on the body cam. Well, the police arrive and Sydney is covered in blood, telling the police that somebody broke in and killed her mom. She's telling the cops that somebody broke in through the back window. And when they see all the blood on this girl, they push past her and they find Brenda on the floor, unconscious, bleeding out, next to a large frying pan and a knife. The minute that Brenda picked up that phone with the dean, Sydney's brain went, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Kill, 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 kill. Any means necessary, any object, find, grab, kill, kill, kill. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. That's what her brain did. I have no empathy for this because people deal with that every day and they don't fucking kill the person that's closest to them, that's been watching over them, rooting for them, taking care of them, and other sick kids for 20 years. And this is not insanity. This is not a young girl with mental health issues. This is very, very Chandler Halderson. I want what I want and I'm going to get it, and I will lie to you to get it. I will be avoidant to get it. I will shut you down. I will make you question yourself. And also, I'm not going to do anything active. I'm just going to push you away, push you away, push you away because I can't handle it. While this is happening, Sydney is screaming, oh my God, somebody broke in, somebody broke in. And then her dad shows up. Her dad does not understand the severity of it. He really doesn't even know why the cops are there or anything. But when he walks up, he sees Sydney covered in blood. And it's almost like he's kind of in disbelief, but he goes into the house. I mean, this is crazy that this was actually all released on Bodycam. We'll put something of it in here because I think you guys understanding her demeanor at the time is fairly interesting. But I'm not going to be watching the full body cam or anything. We'll put a link in the description for you guys that are curious. You can actually see in the footage her dad coming out and being in disbelief and not really processing what he just saw, which is EMTs surrounding his wife covered in blood and his 19-year-old daughter outside screaming and crying. They try to ask Sydney more questions and then suddenly she just stops answering questions. It's like she went into this catatonic state. And then Sydney kind of passes out again. They get the EMTs there and they rush her off. In the process, the police noticed that she had deep cuts on her hands. This is usually evident in a frenzied killing where somebody is stabbing someone so often that the blood makes their hands slip down the knife and grab the blade on accident. Sydney had these all over. They were not defensive wounds. These were attack wounds. So even though she's been rushed off to the EMTs, the police know that they have their prime suspect. Sydney is involuntarily admitted to a general hospital where they give her a psychiatric evaluation, and she's held there until March 16th, roughly about 2 weeks. They start to talk with friends and family just to understand what could have possibly happened. And Lauren, her friend that I had mentioned earlier, she emphasizes that Sydney and Brenda were not just like mother and daughter. They were like best friends, but like very chill. She said, quote, they would hang out and watch movies together. She loved being at home. She never had a bad thing to say about her mom. They never argued. This is like something that a few people brought up. At the police station, Steven gets the news that his wife, Brenda, did not make it. Brenda had been hit in the head with a heavy cast iron skillet. It cracked her skull, and then afterwards, her 19-year-old daughter, Sydney Powell, took a knife and stabbed her over 30 times in the neck. Once again, I've talked a little bit about this before, but sometimes you can look at kind of forensics of things, and it will help police kind of understand the state or something that someone is in. For example, you know, if somebody's stabbing someone in the face, this is very personal. It's like, I hate you. I never want you to see me again. You know, the eyes, it's like, I don't ever want you to look at me again, or I don't want you to look at me. These things tell stories. Generally, somebody stabbing 30 times in the neck is implicative of die, please. It's like very frenzied. It's like if somebody gets stabbed in the heart or the neck, this is like, I need you to die. I need you to die right now. But the stab wounds say a lot of different things. The police also conclude that Sydney had broken the window herself. The cuts on her hand were from the stabbing and also smashing the glass. They obviously believed that she had staged the, quote, break-in. Sydney's charged with 2 counts of murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. But she decides to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, a question for you, because this case has so many parallels with like Chandler Halderson or Jennifer Pan. Do you think that Jennifer Pan or Chandler Halderson could get away with an insanity plea? No, of course. So why should Sydney, just because she's a liar that's 19, right? So of course her defense attorney does what defense attorneys do, and they're like, here are the symptoms of schizophrenia. We need you to start acting like this. I am not fucking kidding, bro. They tried to say that she was schizophrenic. I try not to put a lot of like terminology or anything in the episodes, but sometimes I just gotta like call that shit out. Anybody that has friends or family that are schizophrenic, you know damn well this girl is not schizophrenic. She's just a liar. It's just a liar. So she starts to suddenly have these symptoms, and she talks about hearing voices. She said that she heard voices on the day that her mom was killed. She gets one of her friends to testify that Sydney was having really, really bad dreams. Like, that's it. Like, they said she was having really, really bad dreams, and sometimes the dreams would scare Sydney. Yes, I too have very stressful dreams when I'm having a stressful week. Well, something must be working, or maybe it's COVID, because we are in April of 2020, but Sydney is released on a $25,000 bond, and she's allowed to live with her grandparents as long as she checks in with the courts every week. Personally, I think that they should have kept her in jail. Steven, who has lost his wife and now doesn't want to lose his daughter, understandable, but also interesting because Steven did not house her back home. She went with her grandparents. But still, he pleads with the courts to have a little compassion. However, this is the way he did it. Steven said, quote, I don't know why we're doing this. This isn't what anyone wants here. I don't know how she can handle it. I don't know how I can handle it. I'm trying to keep my family together. Though I do feel really bad for a father that has lost his wife and is now losing his daughter, this is a crime. This is a crime. And Sydney Powell is not somebody that can be let back into society just because her dad is like, no, please, I want my daughter back. She literally snapped because she did not do her college work and started drinking and then killed the person that was supposed to be the closest to her. How the fuck are the rest of us safe? Like, peace and love. I usually try to have a little soft spot for the families. But what do you mean? I don't know why we're doing this. She impulsively murdered her mother. Like, this is not like we'll send her home and she can say, no, you cannot release her out into society with us. Like, what happens if you're Sydney Powell's boss and you have to fire her? It's also kind of giving Brittany Norwood from the Lululemon murder, like, no. You gotta go. So the trial began in September of 2023. And if you've been watching me for a while, you were there because we watched that sentencing as it was happening. If you're interested in this case, I highly recommend checking out those opening statements. It paints a little more of a forensic aspect of this case. We'll put the link there in the description for people that are on YouTube. But I mean, look, her defense attorney's bottom line was he claimed that she, quote, couldn't tell right from wrong in the moment. Michelle Gaffney, the associate dean that was on the phone at the time, she described the phone call in the courtroom, and Sydney literally just had this look of absolute anguish. It was like she couldn't believe what she was hearing, like as though she didn't live it, as though she wasn't there, like she just passed out again. She closed her eyes, covered her ears the whole time. Like she was literally like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to see this. I don't want to hear this. Like, dude, this poor coping mechanism, she saw where it led her. Some people wondered if this closing her eyes and holding her ears was like performative. Maybe she was like really feeling this way or mimicking something, because there would be these moments where she was like, no, I don't see, I don't hear, I don't see, I don't hear. And then there was one point where her high school teacher like fumbled her glasses on the sand, and Sydney went from no to like laughing at that. So there were these kind of odd moments that just seemed like the act would turn off. So next, the defense team brings in their psychologist. Now, I want to remind you guys, in court cases, you cannot just read a headline or something that says, psychologist says so-and-so has XYZ diagnosis. The psychologist for the defense can really say whatever the fuck they want, okay? In fact, the defense team is going to hire a psychologist that will say whatever they want. So the defense hires this Dr. James Reardon, and they said, I have rarely, if ever, seen a situation where an individual was as utterly compromised as Sydney Powell. Now, I also highly recommend that you look up what diagnoses that Sydney Powell was given. I'm not going to say them here because I really try not to mention stuff as much. I mentioned a little OCD last episode, and I'm like, nope, not doing it again. Part of it is that I don't want to miscategorize or overgeneralize. And then the other part is I don't want to demonize certain mental illnesses that already have a stigma. The only reason I mentioned schizophrenia earlier is because I'm like, she did not have that, and I'm calling this shit out. I've seen a lot of cases before where they're like, just put all of these together, and some of these disorders don't even have a comorbidity. Like, what the fuck are you guys doing? So they throw all of these diagnoses, and they're like, look, this is what she has. This is like really bad. And I'm like, no, I'm not buying it, but you know who else isn't buying it? Everybody else. Those were just the psychologists from the defense team, the psychiatric hospital who is not involved in the court case, and then also the state's psychologist came in who completely dismantled the defense. She took the stand and said that Sydney Powell was completely sane at the time of her mother's death. Now, listen, there is a difference between insanity and she's mentally ill. Bitch, I'm mentally ill. You're mentally ill, okay? Just because you haven't worked on your mental health issues doesn't mean that you can go do whatever you want, like murdering your mother and then say, oh my God, I was crazy. Sorry, I don't remember. Bye. We must be firm on these things and make examples of people, because then otherwise we will have copycats that think they can kill their parents, their coworkers, whatever, and then attribute it to a mental illness that they're aware of that they haven't done anything about. After a certain age, your mental health is your responsibility. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but I'm saying as a general rule, And personally, I believe that Sydney Powell falls under this category. The state also called out Sydney by saying the defense's methodologies were fundamentally flawed, and she believed that Sydney had a tendency to exaggerate or even feign symptoms of mental illness. And because they could actually detect that she was faking the symptoms of mental illness, you're conscious, you're not gone. This girl is awake, alive, and knows exactly what she did. And now, just to throw in one unbiased source, the judge was so fed up with the defense team's bullshit expert witnesses that kept saying, oh, this is the most severe case of blah, 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 because the judge knows how it works. He's got to sit in and day out with this. Well, after the state said, no, this is not real, she's faking it, Sydney Powell's defense team wanted to rebut the testimony. And this is what the judge said. The judge was not having it. He denied the motion, and then he said, lots and lots and lots of expert testimony in this matter. Let's move on. He wasn't buying it. He said, do not put another motherfucker up on this stand. Let's keep it going. In September of 2023, it became evident that the jury was also not buying it. Despite the defense's attempts to paint Sydney as a sad girl that just didn't know what she was doing at the time and had some kind of psychotic break, nobody bought it. Sydney was found guilty of murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. With each count that was read, Sydney was crying. Behind her, friends and family were also very devastated. But look, the jury was completely unmoved. This is one of the most resolute juries. And, you know, if you're interested, I believe the majority of this trial is online. When the press approached Sydney and they asked her if she had anything to say, of course, she'd never taken the stand. She never made any comments to the press. She never said anything. But now that the trial's over, anything, Sydney? She didn't even look at them. But she did say, no.